Every year for the last decade, June has begun with a flurry of progressive propaganda as corporations, nonprofits, and government organizations kicked off their Pride Month celebrations. Social media accounts draped their logos in the colors of the rainbow, employees sat through monotonous presentations on the importance of inclusion, and every public space was jam-packed with the iconography of the new state religion. But this year, the Pride Month rollout has been remarkably muted, with some of the loudest corporate proponents suddenly dropping the celebration entirely. Conservatives finally embraced the culture war, showing a willingness to address the issue head-on and wield power in pursuit of their values. And of course, now that the right has finally built cultural momentum, a new crowd of subversive naysayers has risen to lecture conservatives about the dangers of winning, and it's our duty to ignore them. In his 1992 speech, Pat Buchanan coined the phrase the culture war, warning that if Republicans didn't take the battle for the soul of the nation seriously, they would lose everything else that they held dear. Buchanan was promptly ignored, and instead the party focused on tax cuts and fighting wars in the Middle East. The moral majority of the 1970s and 80s was seen as an embarrassing relic to be discarded in favor of issues that perform more strongly in the polls like gun rights and economic growth. The culture war was portrayed as an electoral albatross advanced mainly by hectoring church ladies and embarrassing televangelists. The electoral future of the right lay in a strange fusion of neoconservative economic and foreign policy with a more libertarian approach to social issues like gay marriage. Nature abhors a vacuum, and it turns out that if you withdraw all Christian influence from the public square, something else takes its place. Republicans may have abandoned the culture war out of embarrassment, but progressives continued to advance on all fronts. With little to no public opposition, queer activists were able to convince educational institutions, corporations, and eventually even the military to join in the new American Ramadan. At first, it took significant pressure, but as these organizations filled their ranks with radical activists freshly graduated from universities, the perverse new faith became part of their structure. Blessedly, this religious revolution pushed too hard and too fast, triggering what little remained of the population's disgust mechanism. The change didn't come from Republican leadership or conservative talking heads, most of which were just abject cowards, but from parents. The LGBTQ movement has always targeted children with propaganda, but was generally more careful about actually calling for the children to engage in the lifestyle. Once transsexual ideology invaded schools and children started mutilating themselves, parents could no longer pretend the culture war was just some irrelevant embarrassment pushed by televangelists. Fathers had to face the real prospect of their daughters being beaten bloody during a sports match or even being sexually assaulted by a boy pretending to be a girl in a bathroom. Mothers had to fear their sons might decide life would be easier as a girl, and that the state would take their children and force a transition if the parents disapproved. This was no longer about low taxes and free trade. This was an existential battle for the soul of the nation's children, just as Pat Buchanan warned it would be. Once GOP politicians and commentators saw parental protests and popular backlash against the excesses of the gender revolution, they decided it was time to jump in and benefit from the populist wave. Boycotts were instituted, protests were organized, and for once, companies and local governments felt the pressure of sustained and effective political action from the right. Some politicians like Governor Ron DeSantis of Florida even took the radical step of using power, get this, to defend the interests of his voters, passing legislation and issuing executive orders that stripped the ideology out of public schools and protecting the safety of children. Crazy, I know. This, of course, horrified several establishment conservative outlets who claimed that using power violated conservative principles of small government. It also proved to be incredibly popular and inspired several other politicians to follow suit. This June, we saw a radically different opening to Pride Month. With the Trump administration in power, there are no more government or military celebrations declaring the gender revolution. Major corporations who had been on the forefront of pushing the LGBTQ agenda, like Target, Starbucks, and Disney, chose not to participate in the ritual queering of their corporate logo on social media. To be clear, there are still plenty of organizations that went through the humiliation ritual, though interestingly, professional sports organizations like Major League Baseball were the most enthusiastic participants. It would seem that the corporations designed to cater to Red America are the biggest holdouts, likely due to their hatred for the customers that they actually serve. While this victory is very encouraging, it's important to not become complacent. Conservatives have won real battles in the culture war, but it's far from over. Progressive ideology is still deeply embedded in the majority of our institutions and even our legal code. There's still plenty of work that remains to be done. The problem with populist energy is that it's rarely organized and dissipates quickly after a few battles. The momentum is on our side, but true victory will require a sustained and organized effort. As Pat Buchanan said in his famous speech, quote, "Greater love than this hath no man than that he lay down his life for his friend." Here were 19-year-old boys ready to lay down their lives to stop a mob from molesting old people they didn't even know. And as those boys took back the streets of Los Angeles, block by block, my friends, we must take back our cities, and take back our culture, and take back our country. End quote. This is why the current effort to subvert the recent success of the conservative movement is so concerning. The Republican establishment never liked Trump or the populism he represented. GOP politicians and pundits wanted to collect fat checks, talking about safe issues, not fighting a sustained battle on the most critical topics of our time. There is already an attempt to label anyone who uses power to fight the culture war and promote Christian values as the woke right, in the hopes of returning to a safe and ineffectual version of neoconservatism. These institutional saboteurs are hoping to put MAGA back in the box so Republican voters can be safely milked for cash again, while progressives surge back into cultural control. The good news is that the efforts of these weak and malicious actors are failing. Conservatives have finally discovered that winning is an option, and power is not something to be abandoned to our enemies. The road ahead is still long and will require a sustained and organized effort. But the culture war is a battle that can be won. Block by block, we will take back our culture and our country, protecting our children and ensuring a brighter tomorrow. Thanks for watching, guys. If you enjoyed this video, go ahead and click like, and if you haven't subscribed yet, now is a great time to do so. If you'd like to get these broadcasts as podcasts, you need to subscribe to the Auron MacIntyre Show on your favorite podcast platform, and when you do, leave a rating or a review. It really helps with the algorithm magic. If you'd like to follow me on Twitter, or Gab, or Substack, or Instagram, if you'd like to watch these videos on Rumble or Odyssey, the links to do all of that are down below in the description. And of course, you can pick up merch to support the show, watch my latest video, or read my latest column over at The Blaze. Thanks for watching, and as always, I'll talk to you next time.